the exact moment, but we're live now. Okay. Sorry for being late, anybody that's coming on here. We had my brain broke. It's Chinese New Year and my brain, it's between everything that Megan and I were just talking about this, between everything that is going on like in my teaching business and my coaching business and all the different things, my brain has broke. It's fried. So I'm going to let Meg take charge of this one today. I'm really excited to have you guys on here. I'm really excited to have Megan on here again for the second time this month. If you saw 2 weeks ago, Megan was on. So Megan is the creator of one of the creators of Teachers Together English. Hi, Lori. Hi. She's one of the creators of Teachers Together English. Last week, she came on to show us her awesome new writing curriculum, which everybody has been asking to get some sort of classes to teach writing. Everybody's been asking how to teach writing classes. So when you're done with this live, make sure you go back and watch that one. But today I wanted to have her on because I happened to know that she had something in the works. And I was like, when you have this, you have to show us too. And she's going to teach us today how to assess new students, which let me know in the comments if anybody has a hard time doing that. I think that's, especially as a new teacher, that's one of the things that it's really important, but it's one of the things that's the hardest to do because you don't have the experience yet to do so.
I think it's hard, but it's also scary because people are concerned that they might misassess someone and then they put students in the wrong level. And so when you don't have the experience to say, you know, oh, I've taught a whole bunch of students and they're all A1 and this student's exactly the same, and I know that, it's really difficult to do if you don't have something to sort of assist you. So
hold on, before you start, I do want to say that I don't want anybody to be afraid of making that mistake though, because you can always change it. And especially when you're private, you have the control to say, hey, we're going to switch it to something that's going to work a little bit better.
Yeah. And even the most experienced teachers switch things up all the time, right? You might be 8 or 10 lessons in with the student and just be like, this is too hard. They're missing things. There's gaps in what they know. I think we need to go back and do this unit from here, you know, or we need to jump ahead and do a little bit here. So, you know, and you know, parents and students are fine with that. I have a student in level 4 in the Teachers Together English curriculum, and we haven't done any of it in order because we mostly do it based on which unit title she thinks looks the most interesting. And so she always wants to be involved in picking her next unit. And I'm like, well, they're all about the same level, so it's okay. You know, there is progression, but, you know, I've sort of given her, okay, you can pick from these 3, or you can pick from these 3. And
that's fun.
She thinks it's great. Now she's like 14 or 15. So, you know, she's an older student as well. So it gives her some control over her learning and her process. So
that's fun.
Yeah. So one of the things, as Jillian knows, I'm also very into doing some exam prep. And so one of the things about Teachers Together English is we've made a really conscious effort to incorporate into the core curriculum vocabulary from the Cambridge English exams, as well as writing assessments, reading type, comprehension type activities. So all sorts of things that you can use as you're working through. And then, you know, you're sort of aligned. And so the Cambridge English exams are all giving students CEFR levels. So if you hear like, or CEFR, whatever you want to call it, when you hear someone say, oh, they're A1 or A2 or A3 or B1, like what does that really mean? And ultimately, that's a common European framework for reference for languages. And it's not just for English. It's a reference framework for languages in general. So, for instance, I have a C1 level of proficiency in French as a second language. And so there's very specific criteria that sort of indicates if someone is at each of these levels. But it makes it provides this really standardized way to look at materials, to look at students, to look at curriculum, teachers. Everyone can compare. It becomes very comparable. And it helps also to determine the right starting point for learning. So as I said,
Really quick.
yeah.
Oh, you know what? I'll let you do this, and that'll ask my question.
Okay, so we often hear of pre-A1, and pre-A1 really comes from the fact that Cambridge English, the British Council, has an exam, which is the starter exam. So pre-A1 isn't necessarily seen as a typical level in languages outside of English, but in English it is. So typically we really have, sort of some beginner levels, some intermediate levels, and then some advanced or proficient levels. And so based on the pure sort of common European framework, these are the levels and their meanings. What were you had a question, Jillian? What were you going to say?
I do. Okay. So I have a student that she's
Mhm.
5 years old. I teach her every single day, and she's from China. And I mean, I have a lesson with her every single day. She's one of like the most proficient 5-year-olds I've ever met. Like I told her dad doesn't speak English, but I told her dad that very impressed with her because she you know how when a kid is like fluent for their age and they start, instead of just focusing on the vocabulary, they start being silly, they're confident in their language, and they start acting like a 5-year-old instead of a student, like the dad's moving things on the screen for her and she says, fine, then I'm not doing it. I'm like, oh, I love this. Your English is so good, right? Okay. So for someone that is fluent for their age, a 5-year-old is not going to meet C2 proficiency levels, right? But she is like, does this scale work for a certain age group, or do you kind of just like a 5-year-old's always going to be pre A1, just a fluent pre A1? Like, how does that work?
So I would say a 5-year-old isn't always going to be a fluent pre-A1. So for instance, I have now she's 6 now, but she was 5 student, sort of similar. She's been with me for a while. She used to take 4 lessons. Now she takes 2 lessons a week. And she's already done her starter exam, and she's actually preparing for her second exam. She's following really in her brother's footsteps, and she's operating at between an A1 and an A2 level. And the challenge usually, though, for the younger kids is actually the writing piece.
Right.
And because they need, it's not just about speaking and reading and comprehension and listening, it's also about the writing component of it. And so often for that younger age, it becomes really challenging to hit those more difficult writing standards. And
Okay. And
so,
the grammar, even native English speakers, like
yeah,
my kids, their grammar is terrible sometimes,
yeah.
if
Well, and with the grammar, I find, so because I have her and her brother, and I've actually taught them for the same amount of time. Now, her brother is actually working towards his FCE, so his FCE exam. So he's a B2, right? He's upper intermediate. He's already done KET, PET, and he's working towards his FCE. And he really is he makes more mistakes in his spoken English than his younger sister does. But his sister started at a younger age, and so she's a little bit more fluent in terms of a native speaker, right? She doesn't necessarily know what past tense and future tense is, but she just uses it. And that's more like kids in Canada or the US would, where they don't necessarily know the names of things, right? But they know when they're supposed to say, oh, I went to school today, versus, I go to school, or um, you know, present, future, I'm going to school. It doesn't matter. She can just sort of use those tenses. Whereas her brother, it's a frequent like, oh, don't, you did what today? And he'll correct himself with past tense. So it's those students are lots of fun because you can really see them improve and really have that real native English skill set.
Okay.
And
So basically
yeah,
these levels, they work for birth on up. Like they work for whatever age range you are. It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of how quickly someone can like realistically advance. Like you're not going to have a C1 6-year-old, but you would still use the CEFR levels for them.
yeah, Yeah,
Okay.
and you can still use the content that aligns with those to sort of help guide where you're supposed to be
Okay.
and what types of things that you know are going to be teaching next. You might be modifying the topics you're talking about, but you can still use that. So this is this is from the Common European Framework, and this is what's considered a self-assessment. And so this particular one, you can see we have listening, reading, spoken interaction, spoken production, and writing. And so one way that you can assess students is you can become very familiar with this grid, and you can understand and read and and come to grips with what each of these means. So for example, an A1 who is reading, I can understand familiar names, words, and very simple sentences, for example, on notices and posters and in catalogs. And a lot of us who teach English as a second language find that our students' reading is way above A1, right? They can read just about anything. And they typically have decent understanding of that. But if you then look at their spoken production, for instance, I can use simple phrases and sentences to describe where I live and the people I know. So they might be speaking more with a lower level than they're actually reading at. But then they need to be able to write as well. So I can write a short, simple postcard, for example, sending holiday greetings. I can fill in forms with personal details, and they can do their address and a hotel registration. So this self-assessment, you have to sort of think about, okay, well, how does this sort of apply to my student at this age? And so it becomes a little bit challenging to use.
It's very consuming.
Yes, it's very time consuming, and it requires a lot of experience because it takes a lot of time to really truly understand what does this student actually look like. Because there's some information here, but there's not, a huge amount. There's also new can-do statements that you can find as well. And so there's this, but they're also moving towards can-do statements. And the can-do statements are written in a really simple way, which are great for teachers. And so you can Google those and pull up the can-do statements, but they're really great for teachers. They're a little bit easier than sort of the standard self-assessment framework for the CEFR levels. So ultimately, we want to know, how do you determine which level a student fits into? What if the student's skills are stronger in one area but weaker in another? And what if they seem to be between two curriculum levels? Because those things happen, right? The reality is students don't fit into boxes, right? They're not perfectly molded and we fit perfectly into this box. And even when they actually go and do an exam, they will get a range. And as long as they can meet all of the criteria for each of those levels at the level they're testing for, they can attain that. But they still might be good or excellent in various things. And my students, I find, typically the skills they struggle with are listening, and they often struggle with the speaking exam. And the speaking exam is funny because I can have big conversations with students and they seem to do great, but it's more about knowing how to take that exam. And I know as a French second learner, when I did my speaking exam, that was what I struggled with. And my boss at the time said, you don't have to tell the truth, right? They want to know that you can speak English, not English French. They don't really care about your answers. And I would spend this time trying to formulate the perfect answer in my head. And that's really not what they need. They need to be able to demonstrate that they can speak. And so if a student's skills are stronger in one area but weaker in another, you certainly can, introduce some of those stronger pieces to challenge them, but you want to ultimately sort of err on the side of caution and sort of work at that lower level and identify which pieces are the gaps and work to build those so that you can advance that student as a whole up the levels ultimately. And if they seem between the two, that's okay again, right? A similar idea. We can take some things from here and we can give them a little bit of challenge so that students feel like they're learning and feel like they've got those challenges. But we are still helping to fill those gaps. And even our native speakers in Canada and the UK and in the US, they all have gaps. Every student has gaps. not been sleeping, but theoretically been sleeping, daydreaming through some class in grade 2 and missed something that was really important, and you see it in grade 8. I used to teach math in the public school system, and in grade 9, I'd have students that it's like, you don't have basic times tables, and these were taught like years and years and years ago. And so then they'd get out a calculator and they could do it, but they'd really struggle, and they'd be really slow, and they wouldn't understand what that actually meant. And so they didn't know when their calculator gave them the wrong answer. And it was because
this, for anybody that has not had any formal education in education, formal education, or worked in a public school system, what she's talking about is something that you guys have heard me talk about on here before, and that's called differentiated instruction. No matter what you do, there is no student. You need to learn how to do this as a teacher. There is no student, no matter if you're working for a company or privately, or no matter what you're doing, where you can just pull up the slides and teach what's on the slides. The teachers that do that are going to be the teachers that have lower bookings and have a lower income, because you need to learn how to differentiate and basically make the same class. You can have the same class material for every student, but it's going to be a different class for each student. And even the higher level of that is when you do what I do and you have group classes and you have 10 kids in a class, you need to learn how to take the same class material, they're all looking at the same screen, and differentiate it for all the students that are in your class too.
Yeah, and it ultimately, a lot of that comes through experience, right? It takes time to be able to do that. You get more resources into your toolbox. You've got more that you can pull from without really thinking or preparing, and it just becomes easier. But when you're getting started, you can still do that. It's just you may want to think about, what are my extension questions? How do I make this easier when you're preparing for a lesson? What does my student need in front of me?
Lori wants to know, she's got students in the Middle East. They're using UK and US curriculums depending on whatever school they're going to. Does this align to with students that are living in those countries?
So absolutely. When we're talking about the Common European Framework reference levels, these align for absolutely all countries, everyone who's learning English. This is sort of the standard they've agreed upon. So, and in fact, for the English standards, the UK was actually involved in developing those. And so with the European group. So, with the European group. So it's very applicable. It doesn't necessarily matter that your students are in China, Middle East, the UK, wherever they are. If they are learning English as a second language, this is something that's relevant. Theoretically, it's relevant even to our native speakers, right? Because they're developing. The problem is with our native speakers, you can't really assess speaking production and stuff like that because they've been speaking English from the time they were born. But if you were to look just at the writing requirements, for instance, it's not a bad way to look at writing and assess writing.
So, just so you know, the A1, A2, like all of those levels, they're actually, like, my daughter's on Duolingo. We have a Duolingo family plan. We're all learning different languages. Our house is a language mess over here. But she's always coming to me and being like, oh, I made it up to A2. I'm an A2 level now in I think maybe it's German. I'm not sure which one, because she's got like 10 she's learning. But they use those levels too, even for American students.
Yeah, and there's standards for each of those languages, right? So there's standards for second language learning, whether it's English or French or German or all sorts of them. So there's lots and lots of standards.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So now, one of the challenges that you encounter when you're assessing students is, how do you assess students with very limited English skills, right? And using something like an assessment tool, and I'm going to share some of our new assessment tools here shortly, is one way to do that. But ultimately, if they have very limited English skills, they're probably sitting in that pre-A1. But as you begin to teach them, you're going to find out, oh, actually, they knew a little bit here and a little bit there. And so you may be not necessarily moving as linear a fashion through the curriculum in that, initial beginning, because you want to give them some of those building blocks that they're missing. Shy students are going to throw your assessments for a loop. You may have a student that just does not want to speak to you. They don't say very much. They say hardly anything. And the reality is with that is that, you've got this student that they didn't do very well in their assessment. And you're like, oh yeah, they're pre-A1. And then 5, 6, 7 classes in, you're like, holy, they can speak English. And it's like, oh, I must be a great teacher. I taught them all this stuff in 5 classes. No, the student became comfortable with you. And now they're more willing to share and answer questions. And they're giving you a little bit more speaking production. And you're getting a little bit more out of them because now all of a sudden they're going to answer questions. Redo the assessment or jump around a bit. Use your skills to help them. And
do you typically do one assessment per student, or do you reassess at certain intervals, or how do you do it personally?
Writing, I reassess regularly. So with writing, I'll reassess. And then it depends on whether the students are preparing for an exam. So if I'm specifically doing exam prep with a student, then I do reassess at regular intervals. And I use, sort of mock exams to help me with that after I've gotten them into that initial level. But most of the time, I'm pretty comfortable with that first assessment, figuring out where they're at, and then just moving on from there.
Yeah, that's how. Oh, do you remember your master's degree? I'm trying to think of my classes. So you have your formal assessments where you have, I don't remember.
Some of it's formative and summative.
Thank you. So you've got your formal exams or your formal assessments where you are, those are your summative assessments, right? Okay. So you've got your formal ones where you actually do like a test or an assessment, or you do an activity with them that is actually physically like graded, right? I only do those in the beginning, and then the rest of my assessments are formative, where you are just going in and you're informally assessing them. You're going through and you're saying, okay, well, they're doing good here, they're doing good here, I have to do that. So for me personally, I only do one assessment their entire time with me.
Yeah. And for me, the writing piece is different because sometimes I want students I don't know whether someone's helping them, and I can't strictly rely on their writing homework. And so unless I give them time where I'm not really guiding or helping them, I don't necessarily see that production by themselves. And so I do tend to do writing pieces that are more summative type assessments where I give them one and see how they do without really giving them a lot of support. And then I can use that as a marker to say, oh yes, okay, now we're still struggling with this. We need to work on this. And that way I'm getting writing pieces that are not influenced by a helper. And I don't know whether they have helpers, but some of my students have helpers. And or they write it in Chinese and then they translate it on their iPad or something crazy. So I often do it with writing. With short or incomplete answers, you can prompt them, right? Sometimes maybe they're just not comfortable yet. Maybe they need a little bit of support, a little bit of guidance to sort of get them a little bit more comfortable with you and with what you're saying. It can also mean that they don't actually understand. And so then that would be an indication that you are also knowing where they're at. And I mentioned this at the beginning, but if you put them in the wrong level, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You'll just reassess. You can adjust. If you want to go back and reuse a placement type assessment, you can, or to do pieces of a placement assessment, you can. But otherwise, you might say, you know what, I think as a teacher, this is a better level for them, and try a few lessons and see how they do there. And then if you need to move them up again, move them up again. Don't move them in like a big, massive, sweeping jump without doing some sort of assessment. But, there's nothing stopping you from moving them up a few units, a level, but don't say, oh, I thought they were level 1 and now I'm going to put them in level 4, because they probably aren't yet level 4 if you originally thought they were level 1. So I would redo an assessment in that case for sure. So Teachers Together English has 2 assessments available. So these are free resources. They're available to our premium members, of course, but they're also available on our free membership tier, which means absolutely everyone can access these. And we have a general assessment, which is a reading, listening, and speaking assessment. And then we have a writing assessment. And then there are some learning plan templates that you can use to record the results of your assessment and share them with your parents. And so this is really the exciting part. Premium members, some of you may have poked around and found them this morning when you got a notification you'd been enrolled in the assessment course. And some of you probably haven't even found it yet. But the next time you log in, you'll get a notification that says, oh, you've been enrolled in this new resource. And for those of you who have free tiers that haven't been there in a while, go back, log back into your free tier membership and look at the, I think we have about 40 resources there for you now, including these assessments. So with that, let's jump over to...
And anyone watching this, the link is in the description box for this too, so you can go and grab that, a free one if you don't already have it.
Okay, share this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got to do that.
Oh, I just screwed it up, I think.
Oh, you put the same one on there. Hold on. Hide from stream.
Okay, let's see. Oh, now I've really got it messed.
No, you've just got the same screen on there twice.
Okay, share. Okay, let's go to this one first.
Okay, now we can do it.
All right, so for our premium members, you'll find that you have this new assessment course, and the assessments are all contained in there together. For our free tier members, you'll have a new section of your free tier that says assessments, and you'll be able to access the exact same things. If you're not yet a free tier or a premium member, click on the link in the chat and go over and check it out. You can follow along with us and you can access them right away. So one of the things that you'll see on the beginning is you're going to put their name, and you're going to put your teacher's name, and then you're going to choose the gender. And you are all set to go. Now on the page, you're going to see we've got learning plan tools, so you can flip across to the learning plan tools and you can get a template. And we've also got teacher tips. The teacher tips are also available in the assessment. But you know, these are certainly important to read before you get started. Now, there are really 5 sections to this assessment, but the first part, the warm-up, is not really assessed. And the warm-up, however, as a teacher, you're using that. You're like, okay, how are they doing? How are they answering these questions? And what you'll see when you come in is we have we're going to welcome them. And then we have a bunch of circles down here. These are all different questions. So the first one is really straightforward. It's what's your name, right? That's very much a pre-A1 type question. And then we're going to get into how are you, still in that pre-A1. Maybe those questions go really well. So we're going to jump into where are you from? Where are you from is still pre-A1. You should be able to tell us that. How old are you? And then we can jump into a little bit more difficult stuff, but we're still talking about everyday things. What's the weather like? What's today's date and time? And what is your favorite animal? So this will give you a bit of an idea whether you're having a conversation, whether they're getting one-word answers, whether you're getting sentences, whether you might want to jump around a bit. And if you are going to jump around, then you can use the tabs along the side to do that. So once you get into the assessment is automatic. So it's got interactive questions. You're going to click and choose. If you're using a co-browser like in Fun Class or in Koala Go, then the student can click, on those, and you are all set. So what's this? It's a watermelon. So these are A1. Now, pre-A1, right? And then we have a farm, and we're looking at farm animals. And what room? I didn't answer all of them, but let's see what happens here. I'm not going to answer all of them. We've got some body parts and how many candles are on a cake. We've got some clothing in pre-A1 still. And then we have a listening activity. And I shared sound, I think.
The robot is on the bed.
So hopefully everyone heard that. I think I shared sound. The robot is on the bed, and we're just simply choosing yes or no. So we can see the robot. This requires them to know the name of some toys and also to know where that robot is located. This one is a speaking question. So we also have speaking questions built in. So what's this? And if the student gives you an answer that's correct, you will grade that as correct or incorrect. There are teacher tips on the speaking questions just to give you a little bit of guidance. So in this case, the student can respond with a sentence or one word. So if the student says tennis, we can mark that correct. If they say football, well, then that one's not correct. And then we have a follow-up question on that. So do you play tennis? And again, they can respond with one word or a full sentence, because this is only a pre-A1 level. And then what do you play with your friends? So this sort of follows that, very easy to getting a little bit more challenging with the speaking questions. Maybe they struggle with this, and so you just mark it incorrect. And then this one is more of an open response speaking. So we're looking for differences. And with this one, because we don't want to cover the pictures and we want them to be as big as possible, when you're finished, you can simply pull up the score response information and you can select and you can score it. And in this case, it also suggests that you provide an example. So I'm probably not going to choose the simplest thing on here, because that might be something that is good for the student. But I might identify something, and I might say that let me see, the girl in the first picture has a tube, and I can use the pen and I can circle that. And the girl in the second picture has a surfboard. My circling is poor here. But anyway, now it would be the student's turn to come up with some differences. So it gives them that opportunity to talk and for you to really figure out whether they, have some English, whether they can identify some of these things at the beach. There's lots of things. There's more than 3 for sure. We've got, sea animals. We've got colors. We've got colors of the shovels. We've got directions. The boat is not going in the same direction. We've got characteristics of the person. We have the clothing with the swimsuit. So you can see the flag on the castle. There's lots and lots of actual things in this image that are the umbrella colors that are different. And so certainly more than 3, but lots that the student can pick from. And so 3 is certainly sufficient.
Oh, there's a ton. I see like a lot more that you didn't circle too. There's a lot in there.
There's lots, right? And so they might be focused on colors. They might be focused on all sorts of things. And then you can preview the results. So this is automated, so you can check up at the top. And I think I skipped some, so I didn't answer all of them. So in the first section, there are 12 questions, 12 points. And according to the results, I've answered 6 correctly and 1 incorrectly. And so at this point, if this was truly my score, I would stop. Okay. And I would jump over to the results section, and I would then align that with the with level 1, and I would simply start with level 1 lessons. However, if we want to take a little bit more of a look into this, if we jump to our A1, so back we were here, so now we're here. We are going to see some grammar stuff, so choosing the correct form of the verb. We are seeing again some grammar, and this one identifies sort of that ES difference and knowing that. We have the dolphins pop up, and this is a comparison type question. And then we are getting into possessive activities. So this is Mary's car and which one is correct. And then, thinking about through response. So did you see the film about the pirates? Well, what is the, correct response? Yes, that's him. Yes, so do I. So choosing the correct response to that more spoken question. Again, there'll be some audio. There is for some listening activities. There's a library one, and there is one about Lucy's favorite subject at school. And then we have a little bit of a story to read and a couple of questions about the story. And then we have speaking questions again. So which picture is different and why? In this case, the student would be expected to identify the book and indicate that it's not fruit. And there are some hints, right? So the whatever picture is different. So the third picture is different. In the third picture, it's a book. The other pictures are fruit. So you can give them a little bit of guidance there. And then we have a couple of questions about school. So how do you get to school? And tell me about your classroom, which is more open-ended and gives them an opportunity. So you can see the questions are getting progressively more challenging as we work through. At this point, the student would be up to 24 points. If they are getting 2 or 3 questions wrong, again, it's time to stop and to check your results and move on. When we then jump into our A2, again, some more complex grammar. They all sort of follow a similar sort of pattern. We have some grammar questions, we have some listening questions, we have some speaking questions, and lots of pictures, and this is getting into past tense and future tense. This is getting into some vocabulary work. There's 2 questions on this page. This is a reading task, with a message on the screen and figuring out what you need to do. But you'll notice that at this point, the reading is in the A1. When we looked at the reading, it was very straightforward. What does John have? He had a red ball. That was right in the text. What did they drink? Drank orange juice. It was right in the text. But at this point, the message is, help, did you write down what we have to do before Thursday's English class? I've lost my notes. And this one becomes a little bit more challenging because all of these answers have some elements that could be right. So it really is about understanding the message. And then we have another story with some information and 2 questions on that. Again, the listening gets a little bit more complicated. So this is going to...
Hi, my name is Jack. I love weekends. On Saturdays, I play basketball with my friends. On Sundays, I play soccer and help my mom cook lunch. Last weekend, we made pizza. It was delicious.
So in this case, 2 of the sports were actually mentioned, but we need to know which one was on Saturday. And I don't remember. I think it was soccer. It might have been, no, it was basketball. So with the listening tasks, certainly similar to an exam, if you want to play the listening audio file twice, then that certainly is acceptable to do. And it would be at the same level still. How much does the girl pay for the cinema ticket? And when you listen to this one, you'll find that most of these numbers are mentioned, but what does she actually pay? They need to know the cost of the ticket in that case. And then we're into our speaking questions. And so we're getting into times and routines, and then whether you like these hobbies and why or why not. And so this is very similar to Cambridge English exam type activity where they're presented with a selection of things and they have a conversation about those things on the screen. These require a little bit more subjectivity on the part of the students and the teacher rather, because if they only talk about one item and they don't really know what the other ones are and they can't give a reason, I'm going to say that it's not correct, right? But if they can talk about a couple of them, they're using sentences, they're giving a reason, I'm going to mark it as correct. And so that it'll be sort of up to you when you're going through it to sort of choose your comfort zone, but you want to make sure that they have fairly good understanding at this point. And at this point now they have done 37 questions. So again, same rule, if there's more than 2 or 3 errors at this point, it's time to stop and jump over to the results and decide where they go. So in the first 2 sections, pre-A1 and A1, there are 12 questions in each section. In the second 2 sections, A2 and B1, there are 13 points in each section for a total of 50 points. So there are 50 points available on the assessment, and you will find that you are getting progressively more difficult. And this is, again, it's a reading one. It's reading that sign. It's really understanding that. And, you know, it just becomes a little bit trickier for them. So it is another email message, still reading, and then we will have some work with sort of the best choice here and looking at, you know, which, that, where type words. So you can see that the level very quickly moves up, right? I would ask, asked, asked, so making sure that we're trying to figure out the correct tense based on the sentence. And, you know, might, must, could, all of those types of things. So you can see the grammar has moved up in complexity as well. Still some vocabulary type work and a little bit more vocabulary. And then we have our listening activities. And this one does become a little bit more challenging for sure. If we listen to this audio, you're going to find out they talk about sausages, chicken, and burgers. All of them are mentioned, but which one is it that the boy is going to bring for the barbecue? And it's sausages. And in fact, there's no sausages in the fridge, and he's going to stop and pick some up. So we really have to listen very carefully. But he has lots of chicken in his fridge. And then this one is an advice and trying to figure out sort of what the advice is for the guitarist. And then straight up describing the photo. Very, very similar. Oh, that should say B1 at the top. I will fix that right after the lesson. And we're at 50. So that's 50 points. At this point, if you got all the way here, your student is doing quite well. I only have 9 because I didn't answer most of them. And I technically only had 7 correct and 2 incorrect. So if we look at that, I have 7 correct. I would be a level 2. I'm a free A1, and I would be able to do I'd be working towards the starters exam. You'll notice that in some cases we have actually starting sort of mid-level, so sort of level 3 unit 6, you know, level 4 unit 6, and particularly with those ones, depending on once you start teaching the student, depending on what the student knows and doesn't know, you may find, oh, one of these units, they're really familiar with this topic, but one of the units from earlier in level 4, they're less familiar with that topic, and you may do a little bit of switching and use your judgment that way. So this is sort of our general reading, reading, speaking, and listening assessment. But we have 2. So this is not our only assessment. And so our other assessment is actually a writing assessment. And the writing assessment, okay, we have to get rid of that one. Sure. Is here. So for anyone who was here a couple weeks ago and saw the writing, you'll recognize sort of the person on the front. You know, this character is through our writing pieces. Again, this has the same sort of learning plan tools. It also has some teacher tips, along with some information just on straight up CEFR writing levels. And
is this going to be what we're talking about in coaching the other day?
Similar. Yes, okay. It is similar.
Oh, that's exciting.
So essentially we have a warm-up, we have 3 writing tasks, and then our results tab. Now, with this one, you may or may not do all of the writing tasks. That will depend on your student. But it starts off with some instructions. They're also available on the actual lesson. And then I didn't type my name in. So if you don't type in the student's name, you're going to get this hello null. And that's common in a number of our lessons now. So we encourage you to type in the student's name, or else you're going to have a funny looking welcome screen. And now we're doing some brainstorming. So thinking of some examples of nouns and verbs. If the student struggles with this, you can give an example of a noun or a verb to get them started. And again, there's a teacher tip on here to sort of give you an idea of sort of where you're at. Once you've talked about that, you're then taking the nouns they identified and asking them to name some adjectives that match them. And again, we've got a teacher tip. If they can't, then provide an adjective noun pair that's not one of the nouns that they have given you. After that, we're identifying the proper nouns. You'll notice it's sort of tricky. I put capital letters on all of them. So if you know that proper nouns need capital letters, you might decide that these are all correct. And of course, a dog is not a proper noun. And if you know what a proper noun is, your student should be able to identify the proper nouns. And then we are getting into our first writing task. So for the first writing task, you can give them a choice, an about me or about their best friend if they don't really want to write about themselves, or about their after school activities. And what you'll find down here at the bottom is sort of the evaluation criteria that you're keeping in mind. Creativity, a little bit of consistency. Really, in this case, you want to see sort of where they're at. And you're not providing any feedback or correction at this point. You're just letting them write. If they really
put this together, okay. So can I tell them? Can I tell them?
Good.
Okay, so Megan's part of Teacher Boss Society, and she told me she told me that she was going to be doing the assessments and the writing and everything. And I don't know if you did you say you were going to make a writing assessment or something, or no?
I typically just assess, it's sort of out of the top of my head, right? Like it's like this.
So I was coaching somebody else, and Megan was there because it's group coaching. And Megan was there for it. And they were talking about how to do writing classes. And I said, well, this is how you're going to do it. This is how I assess them. And I said, Megan, you want to take this and run with it and make this an assessment thing? So this is literally the exact way that I assess my students. I'm going to use this now because it looks more professional than the way I do it. Because I'm just doing it on the screen with them. But now it's like an actual, it looks put together. And so I'm excited about this. I'm actually going to be using this because this is the same assessment, the exact same assessment that I do. It just looks pretty.
It's yours with a twist because it has one of my pieces on it at the end. And so it has 3 writing tasks. So this one is that figurative language piece. If the student doesn't know what that is, you can ask them to explain it. If they don't know what that is, we actually have an explanation, and you can see if they can give an example. And so those explanations are already in here for you.
And this just on Thursday? Wasn't this on Thursday's coaching?
It was on Thursday.
How did you do this so fast? Like it was like a couple of days ago.
I was very determined is how I did it. I was very determined that I was going to have it done. And then we jump into the second writing task, which is the beach, which is yours, Jillian. And I've included one of our pullouts, which you see this type of thing in our writing lessons, where you've got those questions. And so you can pull that out as a tip. And so this one is looking at descriptive writing, creativity, sentence expansion. So a little bit more in terms of what you're thinking about. And then from there, I have a error correction. So looking to see if they can find any mistakes in the sentence. And this has number of mistakes. All of the English teachers looking will be like, what? That's not good. But it's super simple. So it's got an error correction is sort of its part 3 piece. And then its third writing task is an opinion. And so writing a response with a reason. And this is something that I always do when I'm assessing. And in this case, I'm looking for their ability to express and support an opinion and to use linking words. Because
let me see the results page. I want to see what the results look like on this. How is that set up?
So the results is this one's a little bit different. This one, it has a rubric. And so what you're going to do after your lesson is you're going to take the 3 pieces and you're going to assess them. Obviously, with the opinion piece, if it's not the opinion piece, you can omit that. But otherwise, you can use the first 3 go for all of them. So writing task 1, you're going to want to do grammar, syntax, vocabulary, sentence structure, and flow. And then your descriptive piece definitely for writing task 2, and your opinion piece definitely for writing task 3. And if you use all of these, they add up to 18. And I may put another note on this now that I'm trying to explain it, because in my head, some of them add up to 18 and some of them don't. So I might put the 3 writing tasks and indicate each of their scores here right after this. And so what I then do is I then have a score, right? The other thing is if they struggle with writing task 1, I'm probably not necessarily going to get to an opinion task. And that's okay. And so your rubric, you're going to use a rubric. You've got a 1, 2, or a 3. You're simply going to give it a needs improvement, good, or excellent, and you're good to go. And then add up your numbers, and you can use this rubric for any of your writing pieces. If you're a month or 2 months into lessons, you're like, oh, I really wonder how they're doing. Grab one of their pieces, grab the rubric, assess it, and see what their score is, and see whether or not you can see an improvement. And so it's a super simple way to really quickly and easily assess.
Do you have this rubric somewhere in there where you can just grab it and without going into a lesson?
Nope, but I'll put it into the teacher resources on our tab.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so that is the rubric. Once you've done that, and there is one for the general assessment as well, you can go to the template for the learning plan. And it's going to get you to edit the template. So it's going to copy this into your Canva. And then.
So then while you're doing that, this is actually something that you can use alongside the writing curriculum that Teachers Together has, right? Okay.
Exactly, yes. So for the writing one, you'll see right here, we have, so just some of the pieces that were straight up knowledge pieces. If they're able to do it or not able to do it, you can indicate that. I think I'll adjust the score a bit so that identifies the writing task. And then just a strength, improvement, tutor's comments, and then your learning plan. And with writing, I always do it with a short-term goal and a long-term goal. So maybe my short-term goal is that we're going to use linking words and work on topic sentences. Or maybe my short-term goal is that we're going to be more expansive in our writing and we're going to try to write longer pieces that are more creative. Or maybe the short-term goal is something just around descriptive language. My long-term goal, because I do test prep, often ties into a test type goal, but it doesn't have to. You could look at, something that's associated with being able to write a specific type of piece, a specific number of words typically in a piece, all of those types of things. So you can really just sort of use it how you want. The other thing that,
sorry.
Yeah, go.
Oh, does this tie in with the CEFR levels?
So this one is really hard to do. So on your actual page, you have under your teacher tips, I've given you a sort of a description, right? So can write basic personal information, perhaps with the use of the dictionary. I've given, can write personal information, likes, dislikes, family, pet, using simple words and phrases. So I've given sort of a description of what each of those looks at or sounds like, but ultimately you're going to have to make your own assessment based on sort of the scale with that. Well, so it's a little bit more challenging.
Yeah. Well, if you're teaching, honestly, if you're teaching writing, I'm going to be like completely honest with you. If you're teaching writing, that is a higher skill level of teaching than just teaching like grammar or a grammar. You have to be more patient. So there's a different skill set you need there. But it is a higher skill level. So in order to be able to teach writing, you would have to be able to do this on your own anyways, in my opinion. Anyways, not trying to be like rude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so I've provided sort of those descriptions to sort of assist teachers.
I love this.
And then we have a simple template as well to accompany the general assessment. So you can indicate the level, the CEFR level, and then what exam they might be working towards and their score out of 50. Strength areas for improvements and your learning plan.
So can you just reiterate here, are both of these on the free tier or?
They are. So they're both on the free tier.
Awesome.
So the free tier has here, let me go back.
There's so many. Share this tab instead. So
if we go and take just a quick look at the free tier itself, and with the free tier, it's lifetime access. So once you've signed up, you have access to this. There's no time limit, and you'll see the very first two things you have are the general assessment and the writing assessment. And so those assessment tools are there. And then you have access to 5 level 1, 5 level 2, 5 level 3, I think 5 level 4, 5 level 5, and 5 level 6. One of our writing curriculum lessons, a little bit of bonus content, and a few seasonal lessons as well. So that is
for a new teacher. It's enough for a new teacher to get started. Like if you don't have students yet, to grab the free tier, not pay any money until you get some students. And once you start teaching and get some money in there, then, you can reinvest it into your business to where you can make it take off. That's awesome. That's so cool.
So, and then once you're sort of, you want to do more, then you can subscribe to just one level, for instance, for $4.99 a month, or to the entire curriculum with all of the pieces, the writing, the core curriculum. There's a seasonal collection. There is a sort of a zero pre-beginner type piece. All of those pieces are included in our premium subscription for $12.99 a month. So well over 600 lessons.
That's incredible. I'm going to start using that because it's like, I mean, aside from the opinion piece and the finding the mistakes, because kind of what I do for my students is I have them right on the screen. So I look for their mistakes. I don't have them find mistakes,
Yeah.
But for something like this, it is really nice. You don't even have to use a co-browser for it either if you wanted to just screen share, because they could be writing on the side or writing on their papers. But it looks so much.
I would have them write on the chat or on a whiteboard so that I can see what they're writing really easily. Yeah. They can write on their paper, but the challenge with that is that then they hold up your paper and then they take a picture, and then it's just a little bit.
Yeah, I have had in the past. I ended up having to do typing lessons with one of my students because she was unable to do it. So I actually had to get a screen, or not a screen, but I put right on the whiteboard a copy of the keyboard. So when she was typing something, I could circle where that key was if she was, to make it go faster. So I have had in the past students that have to write on the paper, or like younger students. It's more work on me to have them, and it's more work on the parents too, and they don't always do it, to have them upload the thing. And when they're showing you the picture, I'll use my little monster here, but when they're showing you the picture, it's usually like this.
Exactly.
It's usually like that, and then it's flipped,
and it's half off the page, and then you get the top part and it's crooked, and then it's like
but this is so cool. I definitely will be using this. And I think I encourage anybody else that's using writing to do it, because I do not know of any writing assessment. Otherwise, I probably would have been using it already to make my life easier instead of, well, not make my life easier, because it's not hard for me to do my writing assessments the way I do them. It's just not as put together looking when I'm just doing it on the whiteboard.
Yeah. Especially if it's a new student, right? When you're just doing it, you just look more prepared. You look like you're ready. And so that's really, part of the big difference is that it's that level of professionalism by having that writing assessment sort of written down.
Yes. I really like this. Well, for anybody, let me know in the comments here if you're already a Teachers Together member and you saw it. If you've seen it, what do you think of it? Or what do you think of it from what she's shown us? I actually have a new writing student tomorrow morning, so I will be using it now that I've seen it.
Excellent.
I can let you know how that goes, because I will use it. I'm really excited, because I don't know how you did this, but this is exactly what I wanted. No, seriously, it is so good though. It is so good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great because I teach a lot of writing too. So it allowed me to sort of formalize it and make it easier.
Were you doing it the same way that I did? Like just having them write it?
Exactly. Pull up a whiteboard and teach.
Yes.
And so this forced me to think, okay, and I had your ideas, and I'm like, okay, it's very similar to what I do. And so, so I did it that way, and I was like, okay. And then threw in the opinion piece. So
Brenda said it looks fantastic. It really does. It really does. I am so excited about this. Having the different things that you can use in class, because I always, for those of you who know how I run my writing classes, I use Book Creator for the majority of, for all my classes, actually, for all my writing classes. And even some, I still have some Lingo Ace students. So for anybody that works for Lingo Ace, anybody that's taken those lessons, or any of the other companies, their lessons are very, the cookie cutter company lessons are very, when you do a good job teaching and your student is a quick learner, they are excruciatingly painful.
Yeah. And repetitive.
Yes. I have actually taken the opportunity to start using Book Creator in those lessons as well. So all my students are doing writing lessons in those as well. So I literally do writing lessons in for all my students that are able to write simple sentences. At least they all start doing writing, even the ones that Lingo Ace has a section called oral writing, which drives me nuts, because it's not an actual writing thing, but they say they're teaching writing, but it's really just speaking. There's no I don't
have to spell out the words. They don't have to write them down. Yeah.
Right. Is that actually a thing, or is that made up, oral writing?
I think it works really well for younger students when you're having students that you're introducing to writing and they see you sort of be the scribe. I think it can be effective. But I mean, I know, in public school classrooms, we have kids who are in kindergarten writing and doing their own writing. So you don't necessarily, and they sound out their own words and they figure it out and they make a picture, and and they learn and their writing improves. And even over the course of, a period of time, you can look at their journals and you can see significant improvement in their writing.
Even for my students,
I've never scribed in public school.
I've never heard of oral writing. I didn't Google it or look it up to see if it's an actual thing, or if they just made it up to sound fancy, because it sounds better than free talk. But I would never have any of my students do oral writing like that. And I have, when I used to have classes on OutSchool before I was private. So it's kind of semi-private, but you have no idea who the student's going to be before they show up in class. So you're teaching, I would teach to the Common Core standards of 3rd grade. So, and it was a mixed class. So it was ELA and ESL. And I would have a lot of students come in, that were not at the right level for it. So that's where learning how to differentiate instruction really comes in hand, right? So a lot of times I will be teaching students that are like 9 years old, and I've got a 5-year-old in class, and his English speaking is very well, and he can do really well on a lot of the activities, but it's a writing class, and he
Yeah.
can't he hasn't even learned all of the sounds to the letters yet, and it's a group class, so I can't focus on it one-on-one. So what I would always do with that student is I would go around and I'd brainstorm with all the students. I would start with him, and I say him, but it's happened more than one time. And instead of doing oral writing like that, I would do the like brainstorm, tell me what you want to write. I would type it on the screen, and then it was his job to go and copy the letters. So at least he was learning, and then at the end he'd have to read it back to me. So it would kind of be like, okay, what do you want to say?
I would call that guided writing, right? And so
Yeah.
guided writing is certainly a thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it's guided writing, you're working through the questions, you're asking them, what they think, what they want to write. Like, so to me, that's guided writing. And guided writing is certainly super valuable and part of the way you model the writing. And so, but I would call it guided writing.
Let me see. What is oral writing? See if it's actually a thing that I just don't know about. Oral writing refers to a practice where individuals verbally compose and rehearse written content, speaking out loud what they would have written down. Okay, so it is actually a thing, but I don't know. To me, that's more of a structured free talk in our industry, not a yeah. But
the other thing I find that that's useful for is having them see what they say. Because if you've got a student that's struggling with verb tense or with things like that, sometimes when you scribe what they've written and then they see it and they're like, oh, wait, that's not what I should say, right? And so it helps them to see their mistakes. But I usually use that more as part of my speaking classes than I do as, what I would consider writing class. So
yeah, I like to one of the reasons that I like to do writing classes for ESL learners especially is because even as I have to stop myself sometimes. Sometimes I'll be recording something that's going to go on like social media for my students, right? And I listen to it and I'm like, oh, I sound like I don't speak English. Like, I go through I'm an English teacher moments. We all do, even though we're English teachers and we're fluent, we say things out loud and we mess them up. But as a student who's learning, they might not catch that. And writing allows them to slow down the brain processing so that they can spend more time on each stroke of the line individually, essentially. It helps them process it better and then retain the knowledge better. So even if you're not teaching writing lessons, incorporating some writing components is extremely helpful.
Yeah, it's a huge thing for students. They need to be able to do writing. Writing is one of those fundamental skills, and if we don't give students an opportunity to write, like even in our workbooks in level 1, there's a picture to color and a sentence that you're not really writing yourself, but you're tracing the letters and you're doing that. So they are writing out that sentence without having, and it's a homework activity. It's a take home and it's with the parents and whatever. But at the same time, they're beginning to put those letters together, those words together in a way that is, theoretically beginning to write.
So do you typically just do this like as a trial lesson or a first lesson, or do you have them do it on their own? How do you typically do it?
I usually do it as a trial, like a first lesson. Sometimes I will give, particularly for much older students, I will just ask for samples of their writing. But the challenge with samples of writing is that you don't know whether someone has edited them for them. You don't know whether it's like a school piece. So you then end up really needing to have a couple of samples of writing to really have an idea of what they actually can do. I have a student that I've taught for a number of years, and it's a group class, and we don't we do more writing now, but we weren't doing a lot of writing at the time. And she sent me on WeChat one of her school assignments to edit for her because she wanted some help with her assignment. And it was about a page long, and it was relatively well written, but there were things, and I'm like, I think that you wrote this with like in Chinese and translated it. And, you know, when I said that to her, I said, it seems to me like this is a translated piece, not a written piece. And so then I started actually putting writing into that group class, and we pull up the whiteboard and we put Post-it notes for each student. And, you know, they all have to write whatever it is. And it's like, you know, they're in like grade 5, grade 6 sort of reading comprehension, speaking, all of those things. You know, we do some debates sometimes, we do all sorts of things. It's a group class, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, your writing is like A1, A2, like your writing is really not there. And so it's really interesting to, you know, force students into doing that. And sometimes they complain, they're not very quick at it either, right? But sometimes, you know, they need to do it. It's good for them. And sometimes they might not like that idea, but it's still good for them. So, yeah. So I always try and weave in writing. You know,
I like the Post-it note idea, by the way. I like that.
Oh, Post-it, I use it all the time.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that idea from you, because in my writing classes, I usually use Book Creator. But it's harder for me to use Book Creator for Chinese students because they can't. So yeah, exactly. I just recently started picking up Chinese students, and I've been looking for, I don't know why I didn't think of the Post-it note thing. Given that a lot of my writing students are older, that'll work for them. Like I could never do that in a group class with, you know, 8-year-olds, but maybe I could, maybe.
Well, the thing about Post-it notes is if someone is editing it, no one else can edit it on the whiteboard. So it's sort of locked to you. So it's got that little measure of like, you know, they're in it, they're editing it. No one else, it's really hard for someone else to be able to do anything with it. And then what we do with them is I then switch them. So that if you had purple and I had orange, and then we finish our writing, then I get you to edit orange and I edit purple type deal. So I switch I do that in group classes as well. And we do get the peer editing that way. And it's super easy for me to assign, right? Oh, you're purple, you're green, you're orange, you're blue, whatever, right? And then I don't really have to, you know, and sometimes they're like, I want to be yellow. Okay, fine. And you just flip the Post-it note to yellow or whatever color. But it's something that works really well for me, and it's quick and easy, and I can literally do it on the fly. I open my whiteboard and here, have a Post-it.
I love that. Yeah. So I've always taught writing classes to groups that are like international. They're kind of everywhere. So I just have everybody pull up their Book Creator account. I haven't started group writing lessons in China yet. So that'll work. Yeah, that'll work really, really well. I do a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of other groups, but my writing classes are all one-on-ones in China right now. And I'd like to get back into groups for my Chinese students. So I'm going to steal that idea. I like that. We're all about stealing over here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time today. If anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat, and Megan will always get it later. And again, the trial, the free trial version is actually a full version of a free version. It's not like a 30-day trial. So the link for that is in the description box. And if you want to see her Teachers Together's writing curriculum, you can check out, if you're on the replay, you can check out this video here. And if you're not on the replay, then it's on my channel under the lives.